Picture the biggest restaurant kitchen you've ever seen on its busiest night of the year. Now take away the electricity, take away the gas lines, the refrigerators, the dishwashers, the delivery trucks. Take away the paid staff. Now hand that kitchen 400 guests. Tell it to feed every one of them twice in a single day, a full dinner at noon and a full supper at night. And tell it that everything on those tables has to come out of one farm, one cellar, one garden, and the hands of women who will accept no money for any of it. Add 40 chickens that were alive yesterday. Add 30 pies cooling on a bed in an upstairs room because there is nowhere else to put them. Add a secret that everyone has known since June, growing in long green rows behind the house where anyone driving past on the road could read it like a printed announcement. That's an Amish wedding in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in November of 1955. A feast the size of a hotel banquet, produced in a farmhouse without a single electric light. A celebration of one of the most private courtships on earth, catered by the least private community in America, where your neighbours knew you were getting married before your own father was told, because they saw what your mother planted in the garden. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists leaning over the fence with a camera. Cameras aren't welcome where we're going anyway. We're going in through the back door into the steam and the smoke and the smell of browning butter, into the 3 days of labour behind the 1 day of joy. One wedding, one pair of hands. Everything those hands would have lifted, stirred, scalded, scrubbed and carried. One thing before we go in, because I want to be honest with you the way this channel always tries to be. The farm is real in its ways. The dates are real. The dishes are real down to the last jar of celery. All of it documented in the memories and records of Lancaster County. But the girl whose hands you're about to borrow is stitched together from many such girls, the way a quilt is stitched from many dresses. The customs are history. She is the pair of eyes I'm lending you so you can stand inside it. I'll always tell you which is which. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to figure out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who want to hear about 40 chickens meeting their destiny in a Pennsylvania wash house before dawn. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your hands are in the chickens before your mind is fully awake. That's the truth of it. Not a gentle waking, not a slow surfacing out of sleep. You've been up since 3, and it is now 3:30 in the morning, and your hands are cold and slick to the wrist, working by lantern light in a washhouse that smells of scalded feathers, wood smoke, and vinegar-scrubbed pine. The chicken under your fingers is cold as the well water it was rinsed in. 40 of them, dressed and drawn and waiting in tubs of brine, pale in the lamplight like a congregation of their own. Yesterday morning they were scratching in the yard. This morning they are the wedding. Somewhere behind you, the first kettle is coming to heat on the washhouse stove, and the sound of it, that low, patient rumble of water thinking about boiling, is the only voice in the room besides the fire. Your breath smokes. The window over the sink is black as a stove lid. No electric pole runs to this farm. No wire crosses this lane. The nearest light bulb is a mile away at the Crossroads store, and it is switched off, because even the English are asleep at this hour. Nobody in this house is asleep. Not today. Your name is Rebecca Fisher. Becca to everyone who has known you longer than a day, which in this township is everyone. You're 19 years old. You were born half a mile from where you're standing, in the district your family has belonged to for 200 years, and this farm, the Stoltzfus place, 96 acres as corn ground and tobacco and pasture in Leacock Township, Lancaster County, belongs to your Uncle Amos and your Aunt Lydia. Their oldest daughter, your cousin Katie, is 22 years old, and in a little more than 5 hours, in the big room of this very house, she is going to stand up in front of 350 people and marry Ezra Zook. And you, because you are her cousin, because you're 19 and strong and known to be steady with a knife, because your aunt asked your mother and your mother said yes before you were consulted, you've been drafted onto the cook's crew. Today is Tuesday, the 15th of November, 1955. And when I say Tuesday, I need you to understand that this is not an accident and not a preference. It is the calendar of an entire people. Amish weddings in Lancaster County happen in November and December after the harvest is in, after the corn is cribbed and the tobacco is hanging in the shed, because no farmer can spare 3 days in any other season, and a wedding takes 3 days whether anyone admits it or not. 1 day to set up, 1 day to marry, 1 day to put 400 people's worth of borrowed dishes back where they came from. And weddings happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Only Tuesdays and Thursdays, because the setting up day and the clearing away day must never touch a Sunday. Marry on a Thursday and you set up Wednesday and wash up Friday. Marry on a Tuesday and you set up Monday and wash up Wednesday. The Sabbath stays clean on both sides. 200 years of practice have worn this smooth, like the handle of a good axe. So, Tuesday, which means yesterday was the setting up, and your shoulders know all about it, and we'll get to that. And it means today the house behind you holds a bride who is almost certainly lying awake in the dark right now, listening to the same kettle you're listening to. The wash house door opens and the cold walks in ahead of a lantern. Becca, the bread. That's the whole sentence. The woman carrying the lantern is Mary Esh, and she does not spend words before dawn. She is 51 years old, built low and square like a good stove, and she has cooked at more weddings than anyone else in the district. Her own count, offered once and never repeated, is 41. She is the head cook, and at a Lancaster wedding that is a rank with real weight. The families ask you. It is an honour you cannot apply for and cannot refuse, and Mary Esh has held it so long that there are married women in this district who have never eaten wedding roascht made by anyone else's rule. The bread. You dry your hands on your apron, your work apron, the grey one, not the good one folded at home, and you go to the long table by the east wall, where 40 loaves of bread are stacked in rows like cordwood. 40 loaves, baked Saturday in this house and 2 neighbour houses, because no single oven alive could do it, and left to go stale on purpose. City people fight staleness. A wedding cook requires it. Fresh bread tears and gums and packs down. 2-day bread cuts clean and drinks up butter and broth without surrendering. Everything about this morning was decided days ago, some of it months ago, and you are only now beginning to understand how far back this day actually reaches. Because here is the thing you keep coming back to. As you take the first loaf and the long knife and begin to cube, through the crust, quarter the slab, turn, cube, sweep the squares into the wash tub lined with a clean sheet. Take the next loaf. The knife handle is smooth and cold. The crumb comes off the blade in a dry, fine dust that settles on your wrist like flour. You will do this 40 times, and your right hand will ache by the 12th loaf, and you know it, and you keep the rhythm anyway, because your mind is not on the bread. Your mind is on the fact that no one was ever supposed to know about any of this, and everyone did. You have to understand how an Amish courtship works and how it doesn't. Katie and Ezra have been going together for better than 2 years. In all that time, neither of them ever once said so, not to you, not to Katie's sisters, not to her mother. Officially, and this is the word people actually use with the straight face, officially nobody knew. He came for her in his courting buggy on Saturday nights after dark and brought her home before the house stirred. If his name came up at the dinner table, Katie passed the potatoes. If you teased her, and you did, you are her cousin, it is practically a duty. She looked at you the way a cat looks at rain. That is the custom. Courtship is secret. It is perhaps the only secret this community keeps, and it keeps it the way you'd keep a songbird in a market square. In plain sight, with everyone politely agreeing not to hear the singing, because the celery told, the celery always tells, and that story starts in June, 5 months before this dark morning. So while your knife works through the loaves, 8 now, 9. Let me take you back to when the secret was planted in the ground where the whole township could watch it grow. In June, your Aunt Lydia planted celery. That sentence sounds like nothing. In Lancaster County, in a family with a daughter of marrying age, it is an announcement printed in letters a foot tall, because nobody plants celery like that for themselves. Celery is fussy. It wants rich ground and constant water and hilling up, and half a summer of attention. And an ordinary family puts in a modest patch, enough for soup and relish trays and a few jars put by. What Aunt Lydia put in, the second week of June, was rows. Long ones. 200 plants, then another 100 in July for the late crop, set in trenches behind the house where the ground holds moisture, and where, it must be said, the rows run parallel to the road. You were there the evening it went in. You'd come over to help hoe the truck patch, and you found your aunt on her knees in the trench with a flat of seedlings, and Katie beside her, and neither of them saying one word more than the work required. You looked at the celery. You looked at Katie. Katie looked at the celery. That's a lot of celery, you offered. We like celery, Katie answered, and firmed a seedling in with 2 fingers, gently, the way you'd tuck in a child. We like celery. You could have laughed out loud, because here is what every single soul in this district understands. An Amish wedding table without celery is not an Amish wedding table. Not in Lancaster, not in this century. Creamed celery, simmered soft and dressed sweet and sour, is on the menu at every wedding as surely as the preaching is 3 hours long, and crisp raw stalk stand upright in jars of water down the middle of every table, doing duty as decoration and food both, because this is a people whose idea of a table ornament is something you can eat. Hundreds of guests, stalks and stalks and stalks. No family can buy that much celery without the buying itself becoming news, so the bride's family grows it. And from the day it goes in the ground, the whole neighbourhood is counting. By August, the rows were thigh-high, and the township had done its arithmetic. Your mother snapping beans on the porch. Lydia's celery looks wonderful this year. Your father not looking up from the harness he was mending. It does that. 10 seconds of silence. November, I'd say. Tuesday or Thursday, I'd say. And that was the whole conversation, and it contained everything, and officially nobody knew anything at all. The celery knows. That's what your grossmammy Fanny says. Your grandmother on your mother's side, 78 years old, who lives in the Grossdaddy house, the grandfather house, attached to your uncle's farmhouse the way a small barn leans against a big one. Retired farmers don't move to town here. The farm wraps an addition around them and keeps them. Fanny has watched this piece of road since before the automobile owned it. She was born in 1877. She was married in November of 1898 on a Thursday, and there was celery in jars on her table too. You can lock up a secret in the house, she told you once, shelling limas into a speckled bowl. But you can't lock up a garden. The celery knows before the bishop does. And that August of 1955, the celery nearly drowned. You will remember that August your whole life, and so will everyone in the East. 2 hurricanes came up out of the Atlantic inside a single week. Connie and then Diane the 3rd week of August, and dumped their rain on ground that had no more room to drink. Up north of here, in the Poconos and along the Delaware, Diane's flooding killed dozens of people in Pennsylvania alone. You heard it talked over at the Crossroads store, English farmers reading the newspaper out loud, the worst flood anybody had numbers for. Lancaster County was luckier. Luck here meant only drowned bottom land and flattened tobacco, and corn knocked down like a giant had rolled through it. But water stood in the low end of Aunt Lydia's garden for the better part of 2 days, and you saw your aunt, a woman you had never once seen hurry, out in the mud with her hoe before sunrise, cutting little channels to bleed the water off the celery trenches, her skirt hem black to the knee. Nobody said why it mattered so much. Everybody knew why it mattered so much. The late rows took some rot and were replanted from the reserve flats she had, of course, already started, and by October the celery stood recovered, pale and secretive in its banked-up earth, and the township exhaled. Then came the last Sunday of October, and the thing itself. Church here is held in homes, every other week, the district rotating house to house. You'll hear more about that another night. The church Sundays are their own world. What matters this morning is what happened at the end of that particular service, when the last hymn had been sung and the benches creaked with 3 hours of sitting. The deacon rose, and in the same level voice he'd used to announce a fence-mending frolic, he published them, that Katie Stoltzfus and Ezra Zook purposed to marry, and the wedding would be held, if the Lord willed, on Tuesday the 15th of November at the home of Amos Stoltzfus. Published. That's the word. The old word. For 2 years the courtship was a closed door, and in one sentence it became the property of the whole church. You watched Katie in that moment. You confess it. You watched her instead of the deacon, and she sat perfectly still, eyes down, and the tips of her ears went the colour of ripe raspberries, and beside you your little cousin Levi, who is 8 and Katie's brother, and had genuinely not known, made a sound like a stepped-on goose and got your elbow in his ribs for it. And by that afternoon the entire district had turned smooth as a wheel from pretending not to know to openly preparing. Because a published wedding isn't an invitation to a party. It is a work order served on a whole community. Ezra himself came round in the buggy that week, calling at house after house to invite the guests by name. That's the groom's job. Every household, face to face, no printed cards, 100 farms at a trot. The district's bench wagon was promised for the Monday. Neighbour women began arriving at Aunt Lydia's kitchen door with their aprons already on, asking not whether help was wanted, but what kind. And Aunt Lydia went to the tall desk in the front room and took out a small grey slate in a wooden frame, with a slate pencil tied to it on a string, and set it on the kitchen shelf where the almanac lives. You know that slate. Every woman in this family knows that slate. It came from Fanny's mother, which puts it back before 1877. The frame is oiled dark with 100 years of kitchen hands, and one corner of it is chipped in a shape like a quarter moon. On it, in a soapstone scrawl that only improves with squinting, are the wedding numbers, the quantities, worked out and worked over across 4 generations of this family's weddings. So many chickens to so many guests, so many loaves, so much butter. How many pounds of potatoes fill the 30-quart kettle? How much sugar to how much vinegar for the celery dressing to come out sweet sour and not sour sweet? Aunt Lydia wrote her own mother's numbers under her grandmother's numbers the week before her own wedding in 1930. Now she wiped the old workings with a damp rag, leaving the master figures, and began chalking the new arithmetic below. 350 invited. 40 chickens, 60 pounds. No, she crossed it through. 75 pounds of potatoes twice. Once for dinner, once for supper, fed twice, and no one counts the cost. That is the scale of the thing, and I want to make sure you actually feel it, because it's the whole reason this episode exists. 350 guests. Some weddings run past 400. Every one of them served a full sit-down dinner at noon, and then the same day, at the same tables, a full sit-down supper at evening. Not sandwiches, not cake and punch and a handshake. 2 complete feasts, roughly 700 dinners worth of food out of one farm kitchen and its wash house, with no caterer, no restaurant, no refrigeration beyond the cellar and the spring house and the November air itself. And no one, from the head cook to the boy hauling wood, paid a nickel. The families provide the food. The community provides the hands. When your own daughter marries, the same hands come to you. It is the oldest insurance in the world, and the premiums are paid in labour and chicken and pie. That is what the slate is for. The slate remembers what no single woman could. And the knife in your hand, you're back in the wash house now, back in the dark of Tuesday morning, loaf 22, and your wrist has that deep, bright ache that lives somewhere between bone and habit. The knife is part of the same memory. This is the bread for the roascht, and the roascht is the reason for the chickens, and the chickens are the reason your hands smell of brine. And all of it was written on a slate by women who are buried now, and the words on the slate came out of weddings that happened when this farm's deed was signed under a king. You are one girl cubing bread by lantern light, and you are also the far end of a very long rope, loaf 30. Keep cutting. Outside the black window, a rooster who has miscounted the hour crows once and thinks better of it. The kettle behind you has found its boil at last. A fat, rolling, confident sound now, and Mary Esh lifts the first basket of cut chicken and lowers it in, and the water takes it with a hiss like a held breath let go. The wedding day has begun, but you're owed the story of yesterday first, because no dinner for 350 was ever won on the day itself. It was won on Monday, and Monday was a battle. Monday began with furniture walking out of a house. You arrived at 7 with your mother, and the Stoltzfus farmhouse was already disgorging itself into the yard. The front room settee going out the door on the shoulders of 2 of Katie's brothers, then the rocking chairs, then the treadle sewing machine with Levi steering its far end and taking the job as seriously as a man moving a safe. An Amish farmhouse in this district is built for exactly this. The whole first floor, kitchen, sitting room, front room, is really one great room wearing removable disguises. The interior walls between them are panel partitions, built to unbolt and lift away, because every house must take its turn holding church for the whole district. On Monday the partitions came out, and the downstairs opened up into a single space almost 40 feet long, smelling of soap and hollow, the way a room only smells when everything that made it a home is standing outside under the porch roof. And when I say the house was cleaned, I need you to understand what cleaning means when 350 people and God are coming on Tuesday. This is not tidying. This is scrubbing the cellar steps with lye soap. This is washing windows that were washed last week, whitewashing the board fence along the lane, sweeping the barn floor, until the push broom raised no dust. Aunt Lydia ran it all without ever raising her voice, a list in her head no slate could hold, and twice you caught her standing still for 1 second in the middle of the emptied room, lips moving, counting something none of you could see. At 8:30, the bench wagon came up the lane. Every church district owns one, a grey, high-sided box wagon, 16 feet of it. That does nothing all year but carry the district's furniture from host farm to host farm, the long backless benches for the preaching service, and the crates of the district's own dishes. 2 horses brought it up the lane at a walk, and behind it came the boys to unload it, and one of the boys was Daniel King. You better meet him now, because he keeps turning up. Daniel King, 20 years old, from the next farm but one, wide through the shoulders and economical with words in a way that is either shyness or sense. The district has not yet ruled. Tomorrow he will serve as a hostler, one of the boys appointed to take the horses of arriving guests, unhitch them, stable and hay 150 animals, and match everyone back to its right buggy at night. It is the job you give a boy everyone trusts. Today he was simply unloading benches, 2 at a time, one under each arm, and when he passed you where you sat on the porch bench pitting sour cherries, put up hole in quarts back in July, pits and all, the way this family cans them, so that somebody's November thumbs always pay for it. He said, Becca, and you said, Daniel. And that was the entire conversation, and you found afterward you had pitted the same cherry twice. The benches came off the wagon. You counted because counting is what this family does. 60 of them, each one 10 feet or 12 feet long, poplar boards worn satin smooth by 200 years of sitting congregations. And here is the trick English visitors never guess, the little engineering marvel hiding inside the plainness. Those benches are also the tables. After tomorrow's service, the same benches the people sat on will be set into wooden trestle frames. 2 benches side by side making a tabletop, raised to eating height in a matter of minutes. The congregation sits on the church, and then it dines on the church. Nothing is bought that can be built. Nothing is built twice that can be built once. And nothing is wasted. If you want a single sentence that explains these people, you could do worse than that one. Then the pans arrived, and the pans are a story of their own. No farm owns enough cookware to roast 40 chickens and boil 150 pounds of potatoes. So the cookware, like the labour, is borrowed from the whole neighbourhood, from both sides of the family, from women who carried these same pans to other weddings and will carry them to the next. All Monday morning they came in at the kitchen door. Black graniteware roasters, blue speckled canners, bread pans, the great cast-iron kettles for the wash-house stove, until the porch table disappeared under 100 years of other families' kitchens. And on the bottom of every single pan, scratched in chalk or scored with a nail or painted in a thin lick of barn paint, is a mark. Initials mostly. R.E. for Rachel Esch, S.B.K. for Sarah B. King, Daniel's mother, on the 2 biggest roasters in the county. A crescent and 3 dots on a bread pan whose owner solved the problem of shared initials with geometry. Mary Esch walked the rows of them like a general reviewing troops, flipping each one to read its underside, and set you, because you were nearest and 19, to listing them all in a school tablet. Whose, what, how many. Mind the marks, she told you, tapping the tablet with one thick finger. Tuesday night, every pan in this yard has to find its way home. A borrowed pan gone astray is a friendship gone sour, and a wedding is no place to lose friends. She looked at you over the top of the list the way school teachers look at the hopeful. Food you can cook twice, trust you can't. Keep that tablet in your apron pocket. You'll want it before this story's over, and all that Monday, around and beneath and behind the furniture and the benches and the pans, ran the cooking, because the things that keep were made ahead to leave Tuesday's stoves free for the things that don't. This was the day of the great baking, and you spent the middle of it in a kitchen so full of women and heat and flour dust that the windows wept steam onto the November glass. Pies. You will never again in your life see pies in these numbers. The slate called for 50, and 50 were built. Pumpkin from the Stoltzfus pumpkins, Snitz pie from dried apples cooked back to life in cider, the deep, leathery, honey-brown apple pie this county is famous for, cherry from your own morning's pitting, custard that would ride to the table trembling. 4 ovens on 2 farms ran from before dawn. Your job at the middle table was rolling bottoms, 12, 2 dozen, until the pin's handles polished your palms hot and the muscle under your right shoulder blade declared itself, and Mary Esch's voice behind you said, not unkindly, "Thinner, child. A thick crust is a proud crust." You rolled them thinner. By evening the pies stood cooling on every flat surface upstairs, ranked on clean sheets across the spare room bed like the most beautiful inventory on earth, and the whole second story of the house smelled of cinnamon and hot lard and the insides of apples. Doughnuts next, great baskets of them, fried in the wash-house in a kettle of lard by Fanny herself, who holds that doughnuts are a matter of wrist and no young woman's wrist is ready before 40. Fruit salads went into crocks in the cellar, canned peaches, canned pears, the last of the fall grapes. Coleslaw was shredded by the tubful. 2 wash tubs lined with sheets, a mountain of cabbage that made your eyes sting from 6 feet away. Because slaw wants overnight in its dressing anyway. The wedding schedule and the cabbage's opinion happily agree. Applesauce was ladled from the fall's canning, jar after quart jar carried up until the cellar shelves showed gaps like a jack-o'-lantern's grin. And in some districts, not all, and I'll be straight with you about which is which, because that's the deal on this channel. In some Lancaster districts the wedding table also carries a little extra vanity called nothings. Wafer-thin rounds of sweet dough, fried in fat until they blister and puff, dusted with sugar, stacked tall by the bride's closest friends. Nothings, because that's nearly what they're made of. Some families would no more skip them than skip the sermon. Other districts have never fried one in living memory, and would look at you sideways for asking. It varies by district, by family, by the ordnung of the local church, and that's the honest shape of Amish custom generally. The big things are everywhere the same, and the small things are as local as the water. In this kitchen, Fanny's kitchen line of the family, the nothings tradition holds, and so on Monday afternoon Katie's 2 best friends stood at the stove flicking rounds of dough into fat, and every 10th one shattered, and they ate the casualties, which is also the tradition. The celery came in Monday too, and now you finally get to see the secret harvested. Late afternoon, the light already going amber and long, Uncle Amos and Levi went down the rows with a spading fork, lifting the banked plants 5 months after the whole township watched them go in. You and Katie trimmed and washed at the pump bench until your fingers went numb past feeling, the water so cold it rang. 200-odd stalks, the finest heart set aside whole for the table jars, the outer ribs chopped into a wash tub for tomorrow's creamed celery, the leaves saved for the roast broth because, say it with me, nothing is wasted. Katie worked beside you with her sleeves pinned back, and neither of you talked much, and there was nothing in the world in that half hour but cold water and green smell, and the small percussion of knives, and you thought, this is the last work I will ever do with her while she's a girl of this house. The thought went through you like the pump water, clean and cold and surprising. You'll freeze your hands off, Katie told you, taking the last stalk from you and shaking it dry. We like celery, you said. She laughed then, the first whole laugh you'd heard out of her since the publishing, and hit you across the arm with a celery heart like a swordsman. And for a moment she was 9 and you were 6 and the wedding was 100 years away. Last of all, in the falling dark of Monday, the ek was made. In the corner of the big room, the corner where the 2 long walls of tables will meet, the men set a special section, the ek, the German word for corner, the bridal table. Tomorrow, Katie and Ezra will sit there with their attendants, wedged into the angle of the room where every eye can find them, and the ek is the one place in this whole determinedly plain wedding where fanciness is allowed out of its cage. A white cloth, the family's best dishes, the celery jars with the choicest pale hearts, dishes of candy and fruit, and the special sweets made by aunts and grandmothers that will be set there in the morning. Fanny has made hers already. You saw it in the Grossdadi house pantry on Sunday, under a cloth, and she lifted the cloth exactly long enough for you to understand. A glass stand piled with sugared fruit, and around it a ring of little frosted cakes, and at the centre, you'd know it anywhere, every grandchild in this family would, the covered milk glass hen dish, white and nested and older than Fanny herself, that comes out only for weddings. Inside it, she puts candied ginger. She put candied ginger in it at her own wedding in 1898, at Lydia's in 1930, and she will set it on the ek with her own hands tomorrow, or die trying. The hen goes to the corner, she said, recovering it, and the corner goes to the young folks, and the young folks go on and get old. That's the whole of it, Becca. That's the entire show. You walked home Monday night under a sky like a colander full of light, so tired the road seemed to sway, and behind you the dark house stood packed to its rafters with benches and pies and celery and borrowed iron, loaded, aimed, ready, and you slept the way the dead sleep, and at 3 the knock came at your window, and now you know everything you need to know to stand where you're standing. In the wash house before dawn on Tuesday, the 15th of November, 1955, with 40 loaves cubed into wash tubs, 40 chickens going into the kettles, and the biggest day this farm will ever see coming up the lane with the sun. By 4 o'clock there are 11 women in the wash house and kitchen, and the dark outside the windows has begun to smell of every stove on the farm. They came the way help comes here, without being fetched. Lanterns bobbing up the lane in 1s and 2s, buggies with their side curtains down against the cold, women stepping into the kitchen already untying their bonnets, hanging shawls on the pegs by the door in a growing dark drift of wool. The cook's crew, Mary Esh at the head of it, your mother, 3 aunts, neighbour women whose pans you catalogued yesterday, and around and beneath them the younger set, you and 4 other girls who exist this morning to do whatever a raised chin and a pointed elbow tell you to do. At a Lancaster wedding, the married women cook, and the young folks fetch, and you have never in your life been so thoroughly fetched at. The chickens come out of the kettles at 4:30, and the washhouse fills with the fat, golden, unreasonable smell of boiled chicken at 5 in the morning. A smell your stomach answers with a growl so loud that Sadie Byler, 16, working beside you, snorts into her sleeve. Nobody has eaten. Nobody will for hours. Cooks eat last. You knew that when you were drafted. And now comes the dish this whole episode has been promising you. Now comes the roascht. Understand something first. In Lancaster County on the 15th of November, 1955, nobody at this wedding will call it anything fancy, and no restaurant within 4,000 miles serves it. Roascht, some say roascht, some just say the roast. The Dutch and the English of it sliding together the way everything does in this county, is boiled chicken picked from the bone and folded through a mountain of buttered bread filling, seasoned and moistened with the chicken's own broth, then packed into roasters and baked until the top goes brown and crackling, and the inside stays soft as Sunday. That's all it is. Chicken and bread. And it is the wedding dish of the Lancaster Amish, the centre of the table, the thing itself, so completely the thing itself that when people here talk about a wedding dinner, they may just say the roascht, the way you might say the crown when you mean the king. Making it for 350 is another matter, and the making looks like this. The chicken first. 40 birds' worth of meat has to come off the bone while it's still hot enough to part willingly, which means it's still hot enough to hurt. You stand at the long table with Sadie and 2 others, tearing carcasses, and it is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. Your fingertips scald, cool, scald again. You learn to work each bird fast with your fingers held like tongs, to flick the meat into the tubs and the bones into the stock pot. Dark meat 1 tub, white another. The bones go back into the broth. The broth is half the dish, and the celery tops from Monday's trimming are simmering in it right now, which means the secret in the garden is already inside the wedding dinner before the sun is up. Steam climbs your forearms. Grease finds the one crack in your knuckle and introduces itself. Your shoulders sing the same low note they learned rolling pie crust. 40 chickens is 1 chicken 40 times. There's no arithmetic that softens it, only rhythm, and the rhythm is where the morning goes. Then the butter and the bread. On the stove, in the widest iron pans, butter in quantities you'd blush to tell the bishop, pounds of it, going nut brown and loud, and the wash tubs of your cubed bread turn through it until every corner shines. Onion and celery softened fine and pale. Then the marriage, bread and chicken folded together in a tub big enough to bathe Levi in, Mary Esh standing over it with a pitcher of broth in one hand, pouring, turning, pouring, her forearms bare and freckled and strong as a man's, testing the give of it with the flat of her hand like a woman judging dough, saying to no one and everyone, "Moist to carry, not wet to slump. It goes on cooking in the pans." She lets you and Sadie season under her eye, salt flung broadcast the way you'd sow oats, pepper till the top looks dusted with gunpowder. And then she takes a pinch of the raw filling, tastes it, stands still for 2 full seconds with her eyes shut, the only 2 motionless seconds this washhouse will see today. The whole crew watches without watching. "More salt," she says, and the day goes on turning. Into the pans, then, Sarah King's 2 vast graniteware roasters first, Chalk marks down, filling packed to the rim and mounded. 13 roasters in all, and into every oven on the property. The kitchen range, the washhouse stove, the little oil stove in the gross-study house with Fanny standing guard over it. Lids on, wood up. By 6:30, the whole farm is one warm engine of roascht, and every soul who steps through the door for the next 5 hours will walk into that smell the way you'd walk into a wall, and I'll tell you now, for the rest of your life, one breath of chicken and browned bread will set you down in this exact morning, 19 years old, aching and greasy and happier than you have words for. The potatoes are the second front. £75 for dinner, the slate's number, which means a hill of them in the cold back pantry, and a ring of girls around it on stools, and you on the tallest stool with your paring knife, and your thumb already wearing its groove. Do the arithmetic your uncle would do. An experienced hand peels maybe £4 in a quarter hour. Call it 5 girls working. That hill is the thick end of an hour's peeling, even with every stool filled and nobody talking, which no 5 girls have ever managed. And supper's £75 are waiting behind it, and the carrots and onions behind those. And this is why the crew is 11 women and 5 girls, and why every one of them was here before 5. The peels curl down into the slop bucket for the hogs. Nothing wasted, not even the wedding's leavings. And the naked potatoes go into cold water in the 30-quart kettles. And Sadie, on hour 2, says what every potato peeler in history has said. I'm seeing them when I blink. Outside, the farm is changing. You feel it through the walls before you see it. Uncle Amos and the men have the barn and yard in hand. Smoke stands up straight from 3 chimneys into a sky-going grey, then pearl, then a hard, clean November blue. No rain, and every woman in the kitchen thanked God for it out loud in passing, as if he were standing by the stove, which is more or less the working assumption here. And at 7, up the lane comes the first buggy, then the second, then 10 more. Then a line. And when I say a line of buggies, I need you to understand what 350 guests means on a road built for hay wagons. It means a grey procession a mile long, iron tyres ringing on macadam, breath of horses hanging white over the fence rows, buggies turning in at the whitewashed fence 2 a minute for the better part of an hour. It means Daniel King and 5 other hostlers working the barnyard like a switching yard, greeting each rig, handing down the grandmothers, leading each horse away to its tie stall with 150 to stable before 9. Through the steamed window over the sink you watch Daniel back a nervous young standard bred between 2 others with one hand on its cheek piece, talking it down, easy, easy. And Sadie follows where you're looking and says nothing with an expression that says everything, and you put a potato in her hand. At 7:30 the bride comes down through the kitchen. That's the custom's plainness for you. No hidden room, no unveiling. Katie simply comes down the stairs into the middle of the work, because the kitchen is the only way to the big room, and the crew parts around her, and for one moment the peeling and the pouring stop. She's wearing the dress she and her mother sewed this fall, new, because a bride's dress is new. Blue, because in Lancaster a bride wears blue or purple, only a colour, nothing more, no white gown, no lace, no train, and over it the white organdy cape and white apron crisp as first frost. Ordinary Sunday shape, extraordinary Sunday whiteness. She will almost never wear that cape and apron again. A Lancaster bride folds them away after today and keeps them her whole life long, and I'll tell you at the end of tonight's story what they're kept for, when the telling won't land so heavy. She looks scrubbed and young and scared in the best way, and Aunt Lydia crosses the kitchen wiping her hands and doesn't hug her. That is not this people's language, but takes Katie's white cape by its hem and straightens it a quarter-inch that it did not need, and that quarter-inch is the whole of a mother's heart, and everyone in the room understands it perfectly. "There's roascht in the ovens," Aunt Lydia says. "I can smell it," Katie says, and her voice wobbles on the second word, and Mariesh says, "Out of my kitchen, the both of you," with all the tenderness in the county packed inside the gruffness, and the day goes on. By 8, the big room is full. Through the doorway you can see it as you ferry kettles, the benches in their church rows, men's side and women's side, the room brown as white and still. 350 people folding themselves into place with a rustle like a cornfield settling. The ministers, the bishop who married Aunt Lydia in this same room in 1930. Ezra in his new black suit, hooks and eyes, no buttons to boast with, sitting where the groom sits with his 2 attendants, Katie opposite with hers. No flowers anywhere in that room. No ring will be given in it. No photograph will be taken in it. Not one this whole day. The faces of this wedding will be kept the way this people keeps everything worth keeping, in the testimony of those who are there. What there is a room the family emptied with their own hands, a corner table dressed white and waiting, and 350 voices about to do the thing you will remember longest. At 8:30, they begin to sing, and the kitchen, I want you to see this, the kitchen keeps working, but it works quieter, without anyone saying to. Knives set down softer, kettle lids eased instead of dropped. Because through the wall comes the sound of the Ausbund, the hymn book these people have sung from since 1564, printed before the Mayflower's keel was a tree, the oldest hymnal in continuous use in the world, words written by their martyrs in a German prison. No organ, no piano, no harmony, no hurry. One voice, the Vorsinger, lifts the first syllable, and the whole congregation swims up under it, and the hymn moves the way honey moves, one line sometimes a minute long, 350 voices braided into a single slow rope of sound that goes through lath and plaster like light through water. You have heard it every other Sunday of your life. It has never once sounded like this, with your hands in dishwater and your cousin sitting 20 feet and 1 wall away, about to be made a wife. The second hymn begins, and you don't need the book to know it. It is always the second hymn, has been for centuries in every district at every service, the great fixed star of the singing, Das Loblied, the hymn of praise. 4 verses, 20 minutes, slow as growth. Every Amish congregation on earth is somewhere inside that same hymn every time it gathers, and standing at the sink you can pick out threads of it. Fanny's high, worn thread from the far room where she sits with the old women, under everything so low it's more floor than sound, the men. Sadie leans her shoulder against yours for 1 second, wet hands held out, and neither of you says anything, and the potatoes wait, and the roascht breathes in the ovens, and the house sings from its own belly. Then the ministers rise and go quietly up the stairs, and Katie and Ezra rise and follow them, and the singing goes on below without them, and the real business of the morning begins. Upstairs, in a bedroom with the coats piled on the bed, the couple sits with the ministers for the abrot, the council, private words given to every Amish couple on their wedding morning while the congregation sings below, the weight of the thing laid out plainly, marriage till death, no divorce, not ever, the door they are walking through described honestly one last time while it is still a door. No one in the kitchen knows exactly what is said in that room, and no one asks. and that is as it should be. What you know is what everyone knows. They'll be up there most of half an hour, and the congregation will sing the whole time, hymn after slow hymn, holding the morning open for them like a held door. And the kitchen uses every minute of it, because here is the shape of the next 3 hours, and it is the shape of a battle plan. The service will run until noon. 3 hours of singing and preaching, that is simply the length of worship here, wedding or no wedding. And at noon, when the bishop's last word settles, 350 hungry people will turn around and expect dinner, hot, all of them at once. Everything now is aimed at that single minute. Mary Esh has a wind-up clock on the shelf by the flour bin, and she has begun glancing at it the way a captain glances at the sky. The creamed celery goes on at 9. Monday's wash tub of chopped ribs into the wide kettles with a little water and a lump of butter the size of Levi's fist, simmered till it surrenders, then the dressing built right over it, cream from last evening's milking, sugar, a careful thread of vinegar, a paste of flour to bring it together, and then the tasting, the endless tasting. Because sweet and sour is not a recipe, it is a location, and every family in this county navigates to it by dead reckoning. Mary Esh tastes. Aunt Lydia, passing through with her arms full of tablecloths, is handed the spoon and tastes. Fanny is fetched from the far room and tastes, and stands there in the steam with the spoon in her fist and 80 years of weddings in her face. More vinegar, she says. It's a wedding, not a christening. Give it an edge. The potatoes go down to boil at 10, both 30-quart kettles rolling, and the gravy is built from the roast broth, skimmed gold, thickened patient and lump-free with browned flour, seasoned till it could stand a spoon upright, tasted by the same 3-woman Supreme Court. The coleslaw comes up from the cellar, crocks sweating cold. The applesauce is decanted quart after quart into the borrowed serving bowls. Bread is sliced. The fresh loaves now, yesterday's baking, saved soft for the table. And butter is printed into rounds. And through it all, through the wall, the preaching rolls on. The second sermon now, the long one, the preacher's voice rising and falling in that old chanted way, Genesis and Tobit and marriages made and tested, a sound you don't so much hear as lean against while you work. At 11, the crew begins to set the rooms that aren't full of church. This is where the house's second nature wakes up. The sitting room and the downstairs bedroom, cleared Monday, take their tables first. Trestle frames carried in quiet as smugglers, benches lifted into them in pairs. And just like that, the thing English visitors never believe, church becomes table. 10 feet of bench that held 6 worshippers becomes 10 feet of table that will feed 10 guests aside. White cloths over them, from every linen chest in the family, seams matched so the tables run like one long ribbon. Then the crates from the bench wagon, the district's dishes, thick white plates by the gross, cups, forks counted in bundles of 25 wrapped in dish towels. You set places until your thumbs learn the spacing without your eyes. Plate, fork, knife, cup, 10 to a side, and down every table's spine, at arm's reach for all, go the jars of celery, the pale hearts standing upright in water, like cut flowers from a country where flowers are edible, which is exactly what they are. Do the sums as you lay the last fork, because your uncle surely has 350 guests, and the house, every room of it tabled, seats about 200 at a sitting. That is not a mistake. That is the system. There will be 2 sittings at dinner. The first for the wedding party, and the older folks and the visiting preachers. The second for the young people and everyone the first sitting couldn't hold, and the crew will wash 200 plates in between, at speed, in dishpans by hand. And then the whole thing again at supper. When people tell you the plain life is the simple life, you may quote them this paragraph. At 11:30 the singing changes through the wall. The last hymn has a lift in it, a note of arrival. And Mary Esh puts down her spoon and says one word. Now. Now, because the end of an Amish wedding service is the vows, and the vows wait for no gravy. And I will tell you the truth of that kitchen. When the preaching stopped and the bishop's voice came alone through the plaster, level and unhurried, putting to Ezra and then to Katie the old questions, the crew stopped, all of it. Mary Esh, with her hand flat on the clock shelf. Your mother with a dish towel pressed to her mouth as if it had asked to be there. Sadie's wet hand finding yours among the forks. You could not make out every word through the wall. You didn't need to. The words have not changed in 300 years. Do you believe, will you keep in sickness till death? A silence. Katie's voice, very small and very clear. One syllable, and no ring, nothing given, nothing worn, no gold now or ever. The bishop simply took her right hand and Ezra's right hand and put them together and held his own over them and spoke the blessing. And where other weddings have a kiss and a shout and rice, this one had a room of 350 people being quiet together on benches, and a kitchen full of women standing in gravy-scented steam with their eyes bright. And then the Vorsinger lifted the final hymn, and the whole house went back into the slow gold river of the singing, and Mary Esh cleared her throat like a shotgun and said, "Potatoes," and the war resumed. The mashing is done with wooden mauls, 2 girls to a kettle, and it is the hardest 10 minutes of work this morning owns. 75 pounds of boiled potato beaten smooth against the drag, milk scalded and poured, butter folded through, your shoulder a hot wire, Sadie counting strokes out loud like a coxswain until the laughing wrecks her count. The roascht comes out the ovens, pan after pan, the tops crackle deep brown, the smell enough to make grown men in the yard turn their heads like weather vanes, and is heaped into serving dishes with the crust broken through the soft inside, steam rising off it in ropes, gravy into pitchers and boats, anything that pours, creamed celery into its bowls, pale gold and glossy, slaw, applesauce, bread, butter, red beets, chow-chow, bright as stained glass. The table's whole standing army, dished and mustard on every counter and plank shelf in the wash-house, until the entire back half of this house is one loaded fuse. And at noon by the clock on the flour bin, noon by the sun over the barn, noon by 200 years of practice, the service ends. The house exhales its congregation into the yard for 10 minutes of air and talk. The men swarm the big room and turn the last benches into the last tables around the white-dressed Ek. Fanny walks through the whole cheerful chaos slow as a queen with the milk-glass hen in both hands, and sets it at the exact corner of the corner table, adjusts it 1 inch, nods to it, and Mary Esh stands in the kitchen doorway, unties her wet apron, ties on a dry one, and looks at her crew. "Hot," she says, "and moving. Here we go." The guests come back into the house, the way water comes back with the tide. Not a rush, an inevitability. There is an order to it, because there is an order to everything here. The wedding party first, Katie and Ezra crossing the big room together in front of everyone for the first time in their lives, taking their seats in the angle of the Ek. She at his left hand now, the wife's side, where she will sit at every gathering for the rest of their days, with their attendants flanking them. then the ministers and the visiting preachers, then the married folks by age, greyest first, the room filling from its corner outward like frost growing across a pane. Benches scrape, 300 voices drop to a hum. The first sitting, 200 strong, folds its hands, and then the whole house goes silent at once. You feel it through the floorboards, a silence with weight. Because before any Amish meal comes the prayer, and before this one the bishop's voice says simply, "Let us pray." And 200 heads bow over 200 empty plates in a room gone so still you can hear the roascht ticking in its dishes in the wash-house. Silent grace, no words at all. Just a long minute of quiet laid over the food like a cloth, and you standing in the kitchen doorway with a gravy boat in each hand, head down with the rest, heart going like a trip hammer. The bishop clears his throat. That's the signal. The oldest of men in the county. 200 heads rise, and the kitchen charges. I want to slow this down for you, because what happens in the next 20 minutes is the whole reason you were brought into this story, and it deserves to be seen properly. Feeding 200 people a 5-course dinner, hot, simultaneously out of a farm kitchen with no electricity, is not catering. It is closer to a cavalry manoeuvre, and it runs on a system this county has spent 2 centuries perfecting. The carriers are the young marrieds and the older single youth, waiters they're called, though no one here would recognise a tip if you nailed it to the barn. 4 to a room, each pair responsible for their own run of table, and they move in relays with the cook's crew at the hinge. That hinge is you. Your station is the wash-house doorway, the pass, where the filled dishes leave the cooks and enter the rooms, and your job for the next half hour is to be a pair of hands that never stops, and a mind that never loses count. Roascht out to the far sitting-room table, gravy following it, creamed celery behind the gravy because Rachel's table was served celery already. You can see the bowls, you're counting bowls without deciding to. Potatoes to the Ek table now, always the Ek first. The corner is served before every other table at every course, not because the couple is grand, but because today, this one day, the community has agreed to put them first in everything. These 2 young people who will spend every other day of their lives being taught to go last. Dishes flow past you the way freight flows through a junction. The roascht goes out mounded in the deep bowls, crust up, steaming so hard the carriers turn their faces sideways. The mashed potatoes go out in white ranges with butter pooling in their craters. The gravy swings past your ear in both directions at once, and under all of it runs the din of a wedding dinner finding its voice. 200 people released from 3 hours of holy silence into food and each other. The room's hum climbing to a cheerful roar. Dutch and English braided together. A joke at one table breaking into laughter that rolls down the room like a wave down a shore. At the Ek, you catch sight, one frame, doorway wide, gone again, of Katie. She has Fanny's milk glass hen at her elbow and the best celery hearts in the tallest jar in front of her, and Ezra beside her in his new blacks, and on her plate the choicest cut of crust from the first roaster out of the oven, because Mary Esh dished the corners bowls herself from the pan she judged best. And if you think a woman who has cooked 41 weddings can't tell one roaster of chicken and bread from another, you have not been paying attention to this county. Katie is not eating. Katie is looking down the twin white rivers of table running away from her corner, at her church, her family, her wedding dinner rising in steam around 350 people, with an expression you will keep for the rest of your life in the place where you keep things, The look of a girl watching 5 months of celery and 3 days of labour and 200 years of practice turn right in front of her into joy. Then the doorway needs you again, because the first crisis of the dinner arrives, and it arrives the way they always do, quietly from behind, already half happened. It's the second batch of gravy. 20 tables drink gravy faster than one stove can brew it, and the relief pot, set on the washhouse stove's hot corner while every hand was carrying Hezu, has caught. You smell it before anyone sees it. That first dark wrong thread under the kitchen's golden smell. Scorch, faint but climbing. Mary Esh's head comes around like a hawk's, and here is where you learn the difference between a cook and a head cook. No shout, no blame. 2 strides, the pot swept off the iron with her bare hand wrapped in her apron. 1 taste from the spoon. 2 seconds of stillness while the whole washhouse holds its breath. Caught the bottom, not the body. She decants the top 2/3 into a clean pot, leaves the scorched inch sitting, and has broth and browned flour moving in a second kettle before the steam is cleared. Becca, stir this and don't leave it. If it thickens past pouring broth. If anyone asks you for anything else, you're deaf. And so for 10 entire minutes of the biggest dinner this farm has ever served, your world narrows to a wooden spoon, a spiral, and the muscle between your shoulder blades. You stir. The roar of the wedding comes to you through a wall of steam. Your face cooks. Your wrist burns in that bright ringing way that means tomorrow will remember today. Behind you the relay flows on without you. Sadie has slid into your place at the pass without being told. That's how the crew works. Water closing over a stone. And in front of you the gravy comes up thick and glossy and unburnt. And when Mary Esh takes the spoon from you, tastes, and hands it back, she says just, "Ja," and you would not trade that syllable for a printed certificate. Twice more before the first sitting ends, the machine jumps its track and is lifted back on before the guests ever know. A carrier boy, 14 and proud, takes a full roascht bowl too fast through the crowded doorway and meets Levi coming the other way at ankle height. And Daniel King, waiting at the kitchen door for the coffee kettles, catches the bowl one-handed against his chest like a man fielding a thrown cat, sets it on the pass without a word, and is gone back to his horses before you can even laugh, leaving the boy scarlet, Levi unrepentant, and one perfect thumbprint in the crust of the roascht which you smooth over with a spoon, becoming the only 2 people who will ever know, and a table in the front room runs clean out of celery. Out of celery at a Lancaster wedding, the one shortage this house cannot survive with honour, until you fetch the reserve jars from the springhouse shelf where Aunt Lydia, of course, had put the Monday against exactly this minute. Because the slate on the kitchen shelf has a line in her grandmother's hand that says, "In effect, they will eat more celery than you believe. They always do." Pie closes the sitting. The pies you rolled with your own 2 hands come down the stairs in relays. Most of the 50, a dozen held back upstairs against the evening, because the slate says what it says, snits and pumpkin and cherry and custard, and go down the tables in wedges, with the doughnuts and the fruit salads riding alongside, and coffee poured boiling from kettles so heavy the pouring is a 2-girl job. And when the first sitting finally folds its hands again for the closing silent grace, and rises and streams out into the thin gold of 1 o'clock, the men to the barnyard to talk crops and horses, the women pooling in the yard, everyone loosened by dinner into the long, sweet sociability that is the actual point of the day. The crew behind them falls on the tables like a receding army's rear guard. 200 plates scraped and stacked, dishpans smoking on both stoves, wash, rinse, towel, reset, plate, fork, knife, cup. The table's reborn white and waiting inside 20 minutes because 150 people are strolling that yard with their appetites politely reassembling, and the second sitting seats at 1:30, and you do it all again. Every dish, every relay. Roast to the far table, gravy behind it. The young folks of the second sitting louder and hungrier and quicker to laugh. Sadie flying past you with pie in both hands, hissing, "My feet have died. I'm walking on my ankle bones." And somewhere in the middle of that second flood, ladling the 11th or the 100th bowl of creamed celery, you look up through the steam and the noise and the ache, and it lands on you all at once, simple as weather. This is what they really serve at an Amish wedding. The chicken and the bread, yes. This celery, the potatoes, the 50 pies. But underneath all of it, on every plate invisible and unmistakable, 3 days of other people's hands. A whole township's worth of borrowed pans and grown celery and 4 in the morning lanterns, served twice over and never once mentioned, because mentioning it would spoil the flavour. By 2:30, the second sitting is leaning back from its pie. The dinner is done. 350 people fed, hot in 2 waves, off one wood-fired farm, and not one guest waited, and not one dish failed. And the loudest thing that went wrong all afternoon was a thumbprint in a crust that history will never discover. In the wash-house, Mary Esh pours herself the first cup of coffee you have seen in her hand all day, drinks half of it standing, looks around at her wrecked, steaming, victorious kitchen, at the crew propped against tables, at the girls sitting right down on the floor with their backs to the warm chimney, at you, and delivers the entire victory speech of a Lancaster head cook, 4 words long, "Now we eat too." And now, with the climb behind us, let the day begin its long, sweet coast downhill, because everything from here to midnight is the part of a wedding nobody photographs even where photographs are allowed, and it is the best part, and we are going to take it slowly. The cook's dinner happens at the kitchen work table, standing and sitting mixed, plates balanced on flour bins, and it is the finest meal served on this farm today. I will not be argued with. The same roascht, the same celery, the same potatoes, but eaten in the wrecked, warm heart of the thing you made, among the women you made it with, at the pace of people whose feet have stopped for the first time in 11 hours. Nobody serves you, you reach. Nobody makes conversation. Talk just rises off the crew like steam off the dishwater. Who ate well? Which preacher went long? Whose baby cut a tooth? The gravy that caught and was saved, told already like a story, 20 minutes old and improving with every telling. Your mother puts the best crust corner of a roast pan on your plate without a word, the way she has since you were Levi's age. Fanny eats a donut she fried herself, judges it aloud, wrist held, and the crew laughs the easy bone-tired laugh of soldiers after. You eat like a thresherman. The roast tastes of everything that went into it, which by now you know down to the celery leaves. The coffee is stove-top strong and you drink it like water. And Sadie, beside you on the floor with her shoes off and her heels propped on a peach crate, says dreamily to the ceiling, 350. We fed 350 people. A pause. Twice when supper's done. Another pause. I'm never getting married. I'm just coming to the dinners. Through the wall, the afternoon is finding its own shape. This is the part outsiders never imagine. The wedding doesn't end with the dinner. The wedding is barely started. Nobody is going home. 350 people have settled in for the whole day and the evening besides, and the afternoon belongs to the 2 oldest pleasures this community owns, visiting and singing. The visiting hums through the yard and the barn. November cool sun. Men along the fence in a row of black hats discussing the corn year and the price of milk cows. Women in the house's warm end with the babies pulled on laps, and the news of 3 townships being gently threshed, and everywhere between them the young folks circling, aware of each other with that mild constant awareness that is the actual engine of these gatherings. And at 3 o'clock the big room fills again, voluntarily happily up around the tables, and the singing begins. The afternoon singing, hymn after hymn, the German ones first, the slow ausbund lines the older folks love, 300 voices with dinner inside them and nowhere better on earth to be. It is not a performance. There is no performance here. There is only participation. The sound comes through the kitchen wall in long warm swells, and the crew washes dishes to it, and I defy you to find better working music anywhere in 1955, better than 300 unaccompanied voices taking their time, singing about heaven with their boots planted entirely contentedly on a Pennsylvania farm floor. It's in the middle of that singing that you get sent up the stairs and get handed by accident the minute you'll keep longest. Mary Esh wants the reserve pies down, the last dozen held back from dinner on purpose, because the slate's margin note, Fanny's mother's hand, 4 generations old, says what it says, hold back a 10th, weddings eat what you show them. And the pies are in the attic, ranked on the spare bed in the cold, clean dark. So up you go, 2 flights, legs remarking on every step, into air that smells of cinnamon and cold feathers and 100-year-old wood. And while you're loading the basket, you straighten up a moment under the rafters, just to unbend your back, that's all, and you look out the little gable window. Stop here with me a second, because this is the view. The whole farm is laid out below you in the late light like a quilt on a frame. The whitewashed fence run the lane still bright, the barn with its doors thrown open and men small as chess pieces along the fence rail. The garden. You can see the celery trenches from up here, stripped now, dark rich scars in the beds. 5 months of secret with the secret finally out of it. The wash-house chimney with its column of smoke standing up straight, your own day's work made visible, rising. And the buggies. From the ground they were a crowd. From up here they are a fact. Grey boxes in ranks down both sides of the lane and round the barnyard and along the meadow fence. 150 of them wheel to wheel, and every single one came here for Katie, whose whole married life is currently 3 hours old. Beyond the buggies, the land itself, Leacock Township rolling away brown and gold and finished for the year, corn shocks, tobacco sheds, the neighbours' silos, farm joined to farm as far as the window glass runs, and every farm in sight has stood in this house today, or will stand in it at the next wedding, or the next barn raising, or the next funeral. From the attic of the Stoltzfus place, on the afternoon of the 15th of November, 1955, you can see the entire world these people have built, and the secret of it is perfectly visible from up here, and perfectly invisible from the road. It is not a landscape at all, it is a web. Every lane a thread, every kitchen a knot, and today the whole web is trembling gently around one bright point, which is your cousin, sitting in a corner downstairs beside her husband, being sung to by everyone she has ever met. You're one thread of it. 19 years old, smelling of gravy, aching in 14 places. One thread, but you're in the weave, and below you, faint through 2 floors, the hymn turns over into its last verse like a great slow wheel. You could stand there a good while. You have pies to carry. You're learning the whole condition of a wedding cook, the beautiful moment and the full basket, always both at once. You take the pies down. On the second-floor landing you meet Fanny, resting on the chair that lives there, hands folded on her cane, listening to the singing come up the stairwell. She pats the chair arm, which means stop, and you stop, basket and all. You saw it from up there, she says, not a question. The buggies. All of them, you say. She nods slowly, in time with the hymn, looking at nothing, or at 1898. At my wedding it was sleighs, half of them. Snow that year early. Same lane, same corner, same dish on the table. Her thumb strokes the cane head once. People think the old ways are a fence, Becca. They're not standing where you were just standing. She looks up at you then, sharp and light as a wren. It's a table. The whole thing is a table, and the work of your life is only ever to keep it set. A beat. Now take Mary her pies before she sings a hymn about you. Downstairs the kitchen has already turned its face toward evening, because this machine has one more full meal in it, and the clock on the flour bin says 3:30 and supper seats at 5, and here the slate earns its keep one last time, or nearly fails to. Aunt Lydia is deep in the big room among her guests, where a hostess belongs, and where she has earned every minute. The supper numbers are wanted, and the slate on the kitchen shelf, consulted by 6 wet hands since morning, has taken a splash of dishwater across its bottom corner, across, of course, the supper potatoes. The figure is a grey ghost of itself. Mary Esh holds it to the window light, tips it, frowns, and it's you, standing there with your pie basket, who hears your own voice say, 75, same as dinner. Because you were there in October when Lydia chalked it. You watched her cross out 60 and write it heavier, and the heavier writing is exactly what smeared. Mary Esh looks at you one beat longer than she needs to. You're sure? She wrote it twice. She said supper eats lighter, but you cook the same because what's left goes home in the pans, Mary Esh finishes, and almost, witnesses would be divided, almost smiles. Yah, that's Lydia's mother talking. That's the whole county talking. She sets the slate back on its shelf with the respect you'd give a preacher, and jerks her chin at the potato pantry. Then you'd best start peeling, memory girl. And so the crew rolls once more. But hear the difference, because your body hears it. The evening push is the morning push played at half tempo, in a lower, warmer key. No service bearing down, no noon bell in anyone's spine. The second 75 pounds of potatoes gets peeled by girls who are singing along now, with the room next door, trebles in the kitchen trailing the congregation like gulls behind a plough. Supper's a different meal, with its own dishes, and every family sets it a little differently. I'll flag that honestly, as districts and families vary. But in this house tonight it looks like this. Stewed chicken gone silky over the last of the broth, the held-back roascht crisped anew in the ovens, fried oysters in Lancaster in November, off the railroad's ice cars from the Chesapeake, the one store-bought extravagance of the whole wedding, and a beloved one across Dutch country, cold sliced beef, potato cakes, the second army of pies. The smell of the oysters frying in butter brings Levi to the washhouse door like a fish on a line, where he stands with the patience of a martyr, until Fanny, passing, slips him one on a fork and swears him to a silence the entire kitchen witnesses. Outside the window dusk comes down early and lavender, the way mid-November does it. Daniel and the hostlers move along the fence lines, lighting lanterns and feeding 150 horses their supper too. You can hear the mangers knock, and the first-floor windows of the big house begin to glow lamp by lamp, and from the road, if you were English and driving past in your Ford with your headlights on, you would see a farmhouse lit like a lantern itself, packed with singing, breathing chicken and butter and cinnamon into the cold blue evening, and you would have no idea what it was, but you'd slow down. They always slow down. At 5 o'clock the tables fill again. Same order, same silence, same clearing of the bishop's throat. And the wedding supper, gentler, golden, lamplit, begins. Supper at a wedding is dinner's easy-going younger brother. The plates go out the same way, the corner first, always the corner. But the relay walks now instead of running, and the room receives it differently. Softer light, softer voices, the day's edge worn smooth. The lamps are lit down the tables, and the white cloths go butter-coloured in the glow, and the celery jars throw long green shadows, and 350 people who have already eaten themselves happy once today do it again with the deliberateness of connoisseurs. The stewed chicken vanishes. The oysters cause exactly the stir they cause every year. You hear one ancient farmer announce, as he announces at every wedding, that he came for the preaching and stayed for the oysters, and the men around him laugh as if it were new, which is its own kind of hymn. You work the pass again, but Mary Esh has quietly restrung the line. The older women forward, the girls spelled off in shifts because she has been watching your crew's ankles give out all afternoon, and because she knows something you don't yet know about how this evening ends. On your last relay you carry the coffee to the Ek yourself, and so you're standing 2 feet away when it happens. Fanny's milk glass hen, which has presided over the corner since noon, white and inscrutable, is finally opened. It's Ezra who lifts the lid. Carefully, both hands, a man who has clearly been warned, and the candied ginger inside catches the lamplight like wet amber. And Katie looks down at it and laughs, and then, just as suddenly, doesn't, because she has eaten ginger from that dish at every wedding of her childhood. Always someone else's wedding, always a piece pressed on her by Fanny with the same words. And now the dish is at her corner. She looks across the room to where Fanny sits among the grandmothers, and Fanny looks back. No wave, no word, 4 generations passing between 2 faces in perfect silence. And Katie takes a piece of ginger and bites it, and that is how the milk glass hen tells you what the Ek is actually for. The corner isn't a throne, it's a relay handoff. Sweetness passed forward, hand to hand, 1898 to 1930 to tonight, and the hen will sit in a pantry now, patient as glass, until it's Levi's bride's turn, or yours. The supper dishes are cleared by 7, the last pie plate scraped, and the coffee kettles retired with honours. And now the tables are not broken down, but reset one more time. Water glasses, the candy dishes from the Ek redistributed down the rows, the lamps trimmed. Because the night's last act belongs to the young folks, and it is the act half the young folks in this room have been thinking about since the vows. They call it going to the table. Here's how the evening singing works, and I want you to notice how sly it is, how sweetly and deliberately engineered, because this is the machine that produced Katie and Ezra, and Aunt Lydia and Uncle Amos, and Fanny and her Jonas in 1898, and very likely the couple whose celery your grandchildren will one day count. After supper, the older folks settle along the walls and the side rooms with their coffee. The tables, the long white tables running into the Eks, are for the youth. The girls take their places first, down one side, hymn books shared between them, and the boys gather upstairs or on the stair landing, all of them, from the confident 25-year-olds to the 16-year-olds, studying their own boots. And then the boys come down, and each boy walks the length of that lamplit room, in front of the entire watching community, mothers, grandmothers, the bishop, and takes his seat opposite a girl, whom he chooses in public. At a wedding, where his choice sits across from him for the whole evening's singing shared songbook between them, while every soul over 40 in the room keeps score behind a face of perfect unconcern. No dancing here, ever. No band, no ring on any hand in the room. This walk down the room is the whole courtship theatre of a plain community, compressed into 40 feet of floorboard, and I promise you, no ballroom in Philadelphia carries more voltage than the space between that staircase and those benches. You are at the pass when Mary Esh takes the dish towel out of your hands. You look at her. She looks at the towel, folds it once, hangs it on its nail with the finality of a woman closing a gate. "Crews stood down till the washing up," she says. And then, because head cooks see everything in their kitchens, including the things that haven't happened yet, the singing wants sopranos. Go. Sadie has your elbow before the sentence lands. What follows is 2 minutes of the purest strategy you will ever witness outside a horse auction. 'Cause seats matter. Where a girl sits determines who can sit across from her. The tall boys claim the far seats early. The young ones cluster near the door for a fast retreat. And Sadie, 16 years old and possessed of a field marshal's eye, tows you down the room past 3 perfectly good gaps, murmuring assessments. "Not there. That's across from the Byler twins. They sing through their noses. Not there. Drafty. Here." Here is 2/3 down the second table. Lamplight. Warm side. Songbooks already stacked. And it is, you note with an entirely neutral spirit of geometry, more or less exactly opposite the point on the staircase where the hostlers, who come in last because they've been settling the horses, always appear. Sadie, "You're 16, you tell her. "And you're 19, she replies serenely, opening a hymn book to test the light. And you've watched him catch a bowl of roascht one-handed and say nothing. A girl has to think about her future. You would answer, but the singing starts. The evening singing is nothing like the morning's. The Ausbund's slow German goes to bed with the old folks. The youth sing the faster hymns, and the English ones too. Gospel songs with swing in them, parts breaking out, tenors showing off. The tune passed up and down the tables like a plate of doughnuts, and the room, which spent its morning as a church and its noon as a banquet hall, spends its evening as something between a choir loft and the world's best chaperoned front porch. Katie and Ezra preside from the Eck, not as guests of honour now, but as recruiting officers. It's the married couple's privilege, at their own wedding, to do the pairing for the bashful. To call a particular boy down and seat him across from a particular girl. And there is nowhere on this earth to hide from a bride armed with that authority, and a lifetime of observed crushes. Twice tonight Katie exercises it to whoops of delight, and one match, a boy from the far district and the older Lance girl, both crimson, both singing suspiciously well thereafter, will end, though nobody in the room can know it yet, in celery. And the boys come down the stairs in ones and twos, gauntlet after gauntlet, and take their seats. Sadie is claimed early, a Beeler cousin, 17, whose ears could light the room, and stops thinking about her future entirely. The hostlers come in last, smelling faintly and honestly of hay, 6 of them in the doorway, hats in hand, and you look at your hymn book with tremendous scholarship, and the bench across from you receives a weight that is not a Beeler twin. You look up, it's Daniel. "Becca," he says. "Daniel," you say. The entire courtship to date, in 4 words and 2 days. He turns the hymn book stack, finds the number the Vorsinger just called, and sets the open book on the table between you, turned so you can both read it, which puts it, necessarily, exactly halfway. The room takes up the tune. He sings low and even, no showing off in him anywhere, and you come in on the second line, and your 2 lines of the hymn go up into the general gold noise of 300 people and disappear there, perfectly private in the most public room in the township. Between hymns he says, "Long day for the cooks," 5 words now. 40 chickens, you say. He considers this with the gravity it deserves. I stabled 153 horses. A pause you could drive a buggy through. I believe you had the harder morning. And that, one dry sentence, offered across a songbook by lamplight while the Vorsinger calls the next number, is somehow the moment the whole enormous day chooses to land on you at once. The 3 o'clock lantern, the bread and the brine, the vow through the wall, the gravy saved, the view from the attic, the web with its threads, and now this, the warm bench and the shared page and the tired sweetness rising through you like heat through a chimney. Nobody will announce anything. Nothing here is announced. If this is a beginning, and neither of you will say so, not tonight, not for a long time, that is not how it's done. Then it will be conducted after dark, unmentioned, invisible, official knowledge of no one. But somewhere out past the lamplight in the stripped November garden, the celery beds lie waiting for spring. And the celery knows. The singing runs long, 9 o'clock, and then past it, the older families departing wave by wave, Daniel excusing himself over and over to fetch this family's horse and that one's, matching every animal to its buggy in the lantern cut dark without one error. That's why they give the job to a boy everyone trusts, and each departure lets a little November air into the warm room, and the room sings on, smaller and closer, the way a fire settles. And when the last hymn is sung, a slow one again at the end, always, the youth reaching back for the old music just as the night reaches its bottom. German words their great-great-grandmothers carried up the gangway of the ship charming Nancy into Philadelphia in 1737. You sing it looking at the lamp flame, and the flame stands perfectly still, and 300 years stand around this room in the dark, approving. Then it's over. Then it's benches scraping, and sleepy children carried out in quilts, and good nights in 2 languages down the porch steps, and buggy lamps swaying away down the lane like a procession of low stars. And then, for the crew, it's the last shift, the washing up. And you already know, because I promised you at the start that this was a story about work, that the washing up is where this day keeps its final scene. Picture the kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, because it is worth picturing. Every lamp the house owns gathered onto the work tables, the stoves banked low and breathing, and around the dishpans the last dozen of the crew, sleeves rolled, aprons soaked through at the middle, hands gone pale and pleated from 16 hours of water. 700 plates have been washed on this farm today, counting both meals and both sittings. Say it slowly, 700. 2,000 pieces of flatware, give or take a teaspoon. Levi is suspected of losing down the well of his own trouser cuff, cups beyond counting. And the washing of the last wave is not the frantic midday sprint anymore. It is something else entirely, something almost ceremonial. The slow, warm, talking kind of work, hands moving on their own while the day gets told back and forth across the steam, already being converted from labour into legend, which is the oldest alchemy in any farm kitchen. And then the pans go home. This is the part I've been saving for you since Monday, since the porch table disappeared under 100 years of other families' kitchens. Because now, by lamplight, the whole thing runs in reverse. The great roasters and kettles and bread pans, scrubbed and scalded and dried by the stove's heat, are carried out to the porch and laid out in constellations, and you are sent for by name, because you are the girl with the tablet. You stand on the cold porch in a borrowed shawl with a lamp at your shoulder, school tablet open to Monday's list, and one by one the pans are turned over, and their undersides read like letters: R-E, chalked twice, S-B-K, scored with a nail, the two vast granite ware roasters that carried the first roascht of the day, the crescent and three dots, a painted thumb smudge of barn red that your tablet says, in your own Monday handwriting, is Hannah Lapp. Ask Mary. Pan by pan, mark by mark, each one matched to its family and nested into the right basket in the right buggy load. Because tomorrow and the day after, these pans will travel home across 4 townships, and every single one must arrive. Mary Esh's words from Monday, which you now understand were never really about pans. Food you can cook twice. Trust you can't. Daniel carries the baskets to the wagons. Of course he does. The horses are his, the night is his, and the porch lamp is apparently on your shoulder. The two of you work down the constellation in a silence that has stopped being awkward somewhere in the last 4 hours without either of you filing the paperwork. When the last basket is stowed, he turns one pan back over before wrapping it, his own mother's roaster SBK, and holds the chalk marks to the light a moment. My grandmother's mark underneath, he says. There it is, a fainter, older scoring under the nail scratch half worn away. Same pan came to my parents' wedding, 1929. He wraps it in its flour sack like a man wrapping a fiddle. I expect it'll outlive all of us. It'll want new chalk, you say. They always do, he says, and ties the basket shut and says good night to you in the exact voice he says it to the horses, which from Daniel King you have gathered by now is the highest register of tenderness in the instrument, and drives off down the lane with the borrowed iron of 4 families ringing softly behind him at every seam in the road. Inside, the house is coming to rest by sections, like a big animal lying down. The big room is benches again. The men reset them before the last singing ended, ready for the bench wagon Wednesday morning. The Eck is undressed, its white cloth folded, the best dishes washed and crated, the milk glass hen dried and carried back to the Grostadi house pantry by Fanny personally, escorted, her word, by Levi, who has been promoted for the occasion to a rank he will claim for years, hen bearer. The last neighbour buggy leaves at 11. The lamps go out window by window until the kitchen holds the only light on the farm. And in that kitchen, at the very end, Katie and Ezra are still here. That startles English people every time, so let me say it plainly. There is no honeymoon. There is no going-away car with cans tied to the bumper, no hotel, no wedding trip. Tonight, the first night of their married life, the newlyweds sleep here, in the bride's own home, in the room made ready for them, and tomorrow morning, Wednesday, they will be downstairs at dawn in their work clothes, both of them, helping wash the tablecloths and rehang the partition walls and load the bench wagon. The couple host the last day of their own wedding. They serve their own feasts clean up. If you want to know what a people believes, don't read what it prints. Watch what its brides do the morning after. And this county's brides do the washing up, and have for 200 years, and would look at you with genuine puzzlement if you asked why. So the last scene of the wedding day is 4 women in a lamplit kitchen. Aunt Lydia, Mary Esh, Fanny in the rocker that has been carried back in. First piece of furniture returned to the house, by unspoken common consent. And Katie, married 9 hours, drying the final dishpan's worth of cups in her everyday dress, her wedding blues upstairs on their hanger, and the white cape and apron already folded away in tissue in the cedar chest, and you in the doorway with your shawl on, sent to say your mother's good nights, catching the moment nobody meant you to catch. Aunt Lydia takes the slate down from the kitchen shelf. She doesn't make anything of it. Making things of things is not in her. She simply rubs the day's workings away with a damp cloth. The 40 chickens, the twice 75 of potatoes, the crossed out 60, all of it, steam and arithmetic gone together, until only the old master figures remain, the deep-scored generations of them, her grandmother's numbers and her mother's numbers and her own. Then she chalks, at the bottom, small and square, one new line. The count of this day, guests fed and pans borrowed, the numbers that will be the starting point the next time this family sets the long tables. And she puts the slate pencil back on its string, and she holds the slate out across the kitchen table to Katie. You'll want this, she says, for Levi's one day, and for your own daughters, if the Lord sends daughters. He paws, the length of a 1/4-inch straightening of a cape. Mind the corner. It's been chipped since my mother's time. It does no harm. Katie takes a slate in both hands, the way you take a full dish, and Fanny, from the rocker, eyes closed, nearly asleep and missing absolutely nothing, says, "Plant the celery early next time. You'll be on the growing end of it now." That's the wedding. That's the whole of what they really serve. Passed across a kitchen table at midnight in a wooden frame, chipped at one corner, older than the oldest woman in the room, and still keeping every number that matters. You walk home. Your mother and father went ahead with the buggy hours ago. You chose the walking 1/2 mile of cold black road between their farm and yours, because your ears are still full of singing and your blood is still moving too well for sleep. The night is enormous and clean. Frost is making up its mind along the fence rails. Behind you, the Stoltzfus place shows one last window of light. The kitchen, then not even that. And above you the whole sky is out. The November sky. Hard, bright constellations wheeling slow over Leacock Township, over the stripped gardens and the full cellars, over 150 horses dozing in their own barns again, over borrowed pans riding home in the dark, over a boy driving them who said 5 sentences to you today, and everyone worth keeping, over your cousin asleep, or not asleep, under the roof she was born under, married, wearing no ring, needing none, her promise witnessed instead by 350 people who will hold her to it and hold her up in it every remaining day of her life. Your feet hurt in the good way. Your hands smell of dishwater and celery, and they will for 2 days, and you don't mind. Somewhere far off a dog states an opinion and thinks better of it, and the silence comes back down like a quilt settling, and you walk the crown of the road in the star-dark 19 years old, so tired you're almost floating, and you find you're taking an inventory the way Mary Esh would, the way the slate would, fed 350 twice, washed 700 plates, saved 1 batch of gravy, kept 1 thumbprint secret, learned, and here you stop counting because what you learned today doesn't go in numbers. It goes like this. A feast is not what's on the table. A feast is everything that walked for days and months and generations toward the table. The rest is just chicken. You let yourself in the kitchen door at home, bank the stove out of pure habit, and climb to your bed, and you're asleep before you can even get properly under the quilt. The deep, paid-for, dreamless sleep of the wedding cook, and Wednesday comes, as Wednesdays do, Wednesday is the third day of the 3, the quiet bookend, and it keeps its bargain. You're back at the Stoltzfus place by 8 with half the crew, and the work is all undoing. Tablecloths boiled and hung in the cold sun like a fleet under full sail. The partition walls lifted back into their slots so that the one great room becomes, click by click, a kitchen and a sitting room and a front room again. The bench wagon loaded, Daniel and the boys sliding the 60 benches home into their racks, the crates of district china counted back to the last cup, and driven away down the lane to wait in some neighbour's shed for the next church. Sunday, the next wedding, the next funeral, whichever of the district's turning wheels comes round first. Ezra works all day beside Uncle Amos, son now where he was a guest on Monday, and you catch the two of them at the barn door at noon, not talking, in the identical stance. Forearms on the gate, one boot on the rail, and you think, that's done then. That's how it looks when a family closes over a new member, like a pond over a stone. And Katie, married one day, spends her first full day as a wife exactly as advertised. Sleeves rolled, washing tablecloths at her own wedding, and singing at the wash tub. Not wedding hymns, just the ordinary Tuesday kind of singing a woman does over work, which is how you know, better than any vow you heard through any wall, that all is well. By Wednesday dusk, the farm has swallowed the whole thing. A stranger driving the road would see nothing. Fences, stubble, smoke from a chimney, one farm among 1,000. Only the trained eye would catch it. The garden's stripped celery trenches, dark as closed ledger lines. The feast has gone back into the county it came out of, the way rain goes back up. But the wedding isn't over. I told you these people fold time their own way, and here is the last fold, the one almost no outsider ever hears about, the visiting. Because there was no honeymoon, the honeymoon happens like this instead, all winter long. Every weekend from now to spring, Katie and Ezra hitch up on a Friday or a Saturday and drive to the homes of their wedding guests. Family by family, farm by farm, a circuit of the whole 350, staying to supper here and overnight there, 2 or 3 households a weekend, working slowly outward through the townships like a stitch through a hem. And at each stop they are fed. Of course they are fed. You've met these people now. And at each stop they collect the wedding gifts. Not china in white paper. A hoe. A kerosene lamp. 6 laying hens in a crate. A quilt with 1,000 pieces in it and a winter of some aunt's evenings. Dishes, a churn, a hand-turned rolling pin, garden seed, a heifer promised for spring delivery. By March, the young couple's goods are scattered in pledged piles across half of Leacock Township, and the giving of them has required, this is the genius of it, that every single family at that wedding sit the newlyweds down at their own table once, and look at them by their own lamp, and fold them into the web on purpose, knot by knot by knot. They come to your family's farm the 2nd Saturday of December, in the first real snow, sleigh bells on the harness, Fanny's weather, 57 years late. Your mother feeds them roast pork and the good applesauce. The gift is a set of granite ware. A roaster among it. Brand new, speckled blue. Not a mark on it anywhere. Your father turns it over before he wraps it back in its paper and taps the clean bottom and says to Ezra, "Deadpan in Dutch, you'll want chalk." And the two of them laugh the way men laugh at a joke that is 200 years old and still working. And Katie catches your eye across the table, and you both look down, fast, at your plates. And the winter turns, the way winters here turn. hog butchering in December with its own crews and kettles, the long dark evenings of harness mending and quilt frames, church every other Sunday, house to house, the benches travelling their circuit, a 3-hour thaw in February that fools nobody. Katie and Ezra live at the Stoltzfus place through it all. The young couple mostly stays the winter with the bride's family, that's the pattern, until the visiting is done and the gifts are gathered and the roads are dry. And then in the spring they load a wagon, and Katie Stoltzfus, who is Katie Zook now, and has been since a Tuesday in November, moves the 4 miles to the Zook farm, to her own kitchen, her own shelf for an almanac and a slate, her own garden plot lying open behind her own wash-house, wondering, you'd swear the dirt itself wonders it, what she'll plant. You help her unpack the kitchen, the first week of April. The slate goes on the shelf first. The milk glass hen is still at Fanny's. That piece stays with the eldest until it doesn't. There is an order to these things, and nobody has ever needed to write it down. And one evening that June, 1956 now, the corn ankle high, the year rolling over the top of its wheel, you are hoeing your own mother's truck patch in the long light after supper, when you hear a buggy slow on the road. Not stop, just slow. The way a young man's buggy slows when it passes a certain farm, and Sadie, weeding the row beside you, keeps her eyes down on the beans with a fixed and shining innocence, and says nothing with tremendous volume. You don't look up either. It is nobody's business. It is the whole township's business. Both of these things are true at once. You've known that since you were small, and this summer, for the first time, you know it from the inside. Your mother didn't plant extra celery this year. Next June is another matter. Next June will speak for itself. The celery knows before anyone. And that's all I'll say, because that's all anyone would say. And some doors you leave shut, even in a story, especially in a story, especially this kind, told in the dark, to people falling asleep. There's one more account to settle before we bank the fire on this story, and it's the one the slate settled first. What became of all that food? Because you may have been quietly doing the arithmetic all evening. 40 chickens, twice 75 pounds of potatoes, 50 pies, and wondering what happens when 350 appetites, however heroic, meet a margin written by 4 generations of women who would rather die than run short. The answer is the answer to everything else in this county. It goes home in the pans. Aunt Lydia said it in October, and her mother said it before her, and on Wednesday you watched it happen. The last roasters of roascht divided out among the crew's baskets, wedges of pie wrapped in wax paper, and dealt round like a hand of some wholesome card game, a full dinner packed and driven by Levi and his father to the 2 widows down the Gordonville road and to old Eli Byler, laid up since threshing with a leg that won't come right, so that the wedding reached even the people who couldn't reach the wedding. The bones from 40 chickens went into Thursday's soup on 5 different farms. The potato peelings had already gone to the hogs, who thus attended the wedding in their own fashion, and will repay the favour at butchering time. And the crew's own share. This is the piece of law every wedding cook in Lancaster will tell you with a hand on her heart, is the best of all, because everyone here knows that roascht is better the second day. Warmed over in a slow oven till the crust comes back, it tastes of everything it tasted of before, plus rest. You ate it Wednesday noon at your own family's table, and your father, who had eaten it fresh at the wedding not 24 hours earlier, held out his plate for more and pronounced the whole institution of marriage a sound idea. And Mary Esh went home last. That's the other ending I owe you. Wednesday evening, when the tablecloths were folded and the last basket stowed in her buggy. She stood a minute in the emptied kitchen, hers no longer, a kitchen again, just a kitchen. And you happened to be the one nearest when she looked around it once, the way a captain looks at a sea that behaved itself. 42 weddings now. She caught you watching, and she did not smile, because she is Mary Esh, but she took her bonnet strings in both hands and tied them with the air of a woman closing the ledger on a good year, and she said, "You kept count today. You kept your feet. You'll cook your own 40, if you're fool enough to keep saying yes." She climbed into her buggy and took up the lines, and then, already rolling, delivered over her shoulder the only compliment anyone in this county has ever confirmed her giving. The bread was cut right. You stood in the lane a full minute after she was gone, holding that sentence like a warm plate. I'll tell you one thing more, and then the lamp goes down. That world was not standing still, whatever the postcards say. In 1955, the tourists had already found Lancaster County. Route 30 ran thicker every summer with cars slowing past the farms, and there were English magazines that year calling the Amish a vanishing people, a leftover, a curiosity that the 20th century would surely finish digesting within a generation. The century believed it. The century had electricity and interstates and television aerials going up like a new kind of corn, and it looked at a girl peeling potatoes by lantern light and saw the past. It was wrong, of course. Wrong in the flattest, most measurable way. There are many times more Amish in America now, in your now, than there were the morning Becca cubed those 40 loaves. But I don't bring it up to score points for anybody. I bring it up because of what it means about the day you just lived. Every pie in that upstairs bedroom, every chalk mark on every pan, every slow verse of Dusloblied coming through the wall. None of it survived by accident. It survived because year upon year, wedding upon wedding, ordinary tired people kept choosing it, kept saying yes to the 3 a.m. knock, kept planting celery for other people's joy. Nothing about that November Tuesday was quaint. It was a decision, renewed 700 plates at a time. It still is. So let's begin to let it all go, the way the day itself let go. I'll keep the last promise first, the one I made you this morning when Katie came down the stairs in white organdy. The cape and apron a Lancaster bride wears at her wedding, folded away that same night in tissue in a cedar chest, kept her whole life and almost never worn again, are kept for the end of it. Many a woman in this county, having worn them the day she was married, wears them once more at the last, when her family lays her to rest. And I know how that sounds if you've never sat with it, so sit with it a moment, here in the warm dark, because it isn't sorrowful. It's the roundest sentence this plain world knows how to write. The same white for the beginning and the end. The wedding morning and the last morning folded together in one drawer, so that a life is bracketed like a hymn between the same 2 bars. These are not people afraid of time. They plant in June for a wedding in November. They keep a dish for the corner and a slate for the numbers and a white apron for the far door, and they are not afraid. And tonight, borrowing their calendar, neither are you. As for the ones we've walked with, and here I owe you the honesty I promised at the start, Katie and Ezra, Becca and Daniel, Mary Esh with her 41 weddings, Fanny in her rocker, Sadie of the strategic bench, Levi the hen-bearer. They are the composite children of 1,000 true kitchens, stitched from the documented life of that county in that year. And whatever real girl stood at those real dishpans on the real Tuesdays of November 1955, and there were many. The church newsletters of that season are thick with published couples. History has closed gently over their names, the way the pond closes over the stone. But the roascht is real, and you can smell it in Lancaster County to this day. The celery still goes into the trenches in June, and the neighbours still count the rows. The bench wagons still roll farm to farm. The benches still become tables. The eck still gets the best dishes, and the corner still gets served first. The ausbund is still opened, and Das Loblied is still the second hymn, 400 years old and not going anywhere. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays every November, somewhere off a Pennsylvania back road, 400 people are being fed twice from one farm kitchen by women who will take no money. And if you drove past tonight with your headlights on, you would see the windows glowing, and you would slow down. They always slow down. And since this was first and last a story about a table, let's set it one more time, slowly, from memory, the way you'd walk a dark house you know by heart, and then leave it set. The roascht at the centre, always the roascht, chicken and buttered bread baked into one thing, crust broken through to the soft inside, steam rising in ropes, the mashed potatoes in their white ranges with the butter pooling, the gravy, gold and patient, that a girl once saved with a wooden spoon and 10 minutes of her whole attention. The creamed celery, pale and glossy, sweet and sour found by dead reckoning, with Fanny's edge on it. It's a wedding, not a christening. The raw stalk standing in their jars of water down the spine of every table. 5 months of secret served upright. The coleslaw cold from the crocks, the applesauce from the fall canning, the red beets and the chow-chow bright as stained glass, the fresh bread and the printed butter, the fried oysters that came up from the Chesapeake on the railroad's ice, the one-bought extravagance, worth it every year, the doughnuts of a held wrist, the nothings in the districts that fry them, sugar-dusted and shattering nearly nothing and entirely necessary, and the pies, the snits, the pumpkin, the cherry of your own morning's pitting, the custard that rode to the table trembling, 50 of them all told, a dozen held back for evening, because weddings eat what you show them, and the slate is never wrong. That's the menu. That's the documented, real, remembered menu of a Lancaster County Amish wedding in the November of 1955, and you could read it off a scholar's page in one dry minute, or you could do what you did tonight and earn it dish by dish with your own borrowed hands, and know forever why every item on it is really made of the same single ingredient, which does not appear on any list and is the only one that can't be bought. Say the words once more, quietly, and feel how they've changed since you learned them. Roascht, eck, ausbund, grossdadi house, going to the table. This morning they were vocabulary. Now they're rooms you've stood in. That's the only kind of history this channel knows how to serve. The kind you can smell. And you've eaten well tonight, and it's late. The wedding you lived tonight is 70 years gone. The girl whose hand you borrowed would be an old woman now. A grossmummy in her own grandfather house. Some slate on some shelf carrying her numbers in the middle rows. Some grandchild rolling pie crust under her eye. Thinner child. A thick crust is a proud crust. And the day you just work beside her would be, to her, one bright coal in a long banked fire of such days. That's what a life is, in the reckoning of that county. Not the feast. The feasts are only the knots. But the long, strong thread between them, work and rest, planting and harvest, Singing and silence, each in its season, each in its turn, world without end. And your day, yours, the one on the other side of this screen, whatever it held, is over now too. It counts the same. It goes on the same slate, so put it down, all of it. You're through with it now. You've been up, in a manner of speaking, since 3 a.m. You cubed the bread and you picked the chickens and you stirred the gravy that nearly caught. You heard the vows come through the wall. You fed 350 people twice and washed 700 plates and matched every borrowed pan to its chalk and sent them all home right. You've done enough. You've held enough. You've carried enough. Warm enough now. Fed enough now. Safe enough now, and that's not nothing. On most nights of human history, that was everything. Tomorrow there will be work. There is always work. That's not a burden, that's the thread. Tomorrow there will be its own 40 chickens, in whatever form your life serves them. Tomorrow can have all of it, but that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this: the dark room, the warm quilt, the slow breath. The 11 o'clock of your own long Tuesday, with the last window of light about to go out. Let it go out. Let the lamps go dark, window by window, the way the farmhouse darkened. Let the tables be cleared and the benches racked and the wagon roll away down the lane. Let the singing sink to one voice, and the one voice to a hum, and the hum to the sound of your own breathing, which was underneath it the whole time. Let sleep come up the lane the way the buggies came, unhurried, iron on stone, certain of its welcome. Centuries will pass. They always do. The lanterns you worked by will become bulbs, and the bulbs will become things without names yet. The roads past the celery gardens will carry machines the Bishop of 1955 never dreamed of. Even that farm, even that county will bend and change the way all living things bend and change. But somewhere people will still plant something in June for a joy they can't yet announce. Still cook for each other in ridiculous holy quantities and take no money. Still mark the bottoms of the borrowed pans and send everyone home right. Still put their best in the corner, and serve the corner first and seat the young across from the young and pretend not to watch. Some things don't change. The table doesn't change. The long thread doesn't change. You're on the thread. You always were. So let it hold you now. The way it held a tired girl on a dark road in November of 1955, walking home under the whole bright sky with dishwater hands and a full heart, half a mile from her own quilt and closer with every step. Let the world fade like a lamp turned down. Let the noise quiet the way a farmhouse quiets, room by room by room. Let your thoughts slow and soften and settle at last, like a house at midnight, like snow on a lane, like the long tables folded white and put away. You've earned this rest. The whole day says so. The slate says so. Take it, and dream, if you dream at all, of lamplight and celery rows, of bread and singing, of a corner table set with sweetness for the young, and of every good thing carried carefully hand to hand down the long lane of the years all the way to you. Good night.